see him all the time.
Yes.
This is my secret.
Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. I am Peggy Martin, President of the American Association of University Women, Morgan Hill Branch. And again, thank you for being here tonight. Our program theme throughout the year has been about community. And AAUW supports our community by our programs and by the proceeds from our Wildflower Run. Last year, we allocated $51,000 to scholarships and programs that support equity and education for women and girls. We're very proud of that accomplishment and what we've been able to do for our community. If you are interested in knowing more about our Wildflower Run, which will be taking place on Sunday, March the 25th, Elizabeth Mandel can assist with any questions that you may have. Also, if you're interested in membership with AAUW or more information about what our branch does, Jenny Redfern, who is our VP of membership, can assist with that. And now I'm going to transfer the program over to Maggie here in just a minute. Maggie is our co-vice president of programs. But tonight, we're also doing a community program, which is in alignment with our theme for the year. And it's Make Your Voice Heard, Part 2. And you will hear from panelists that are up here tonight, and thank you for being here. And we're going to talk about how you would run for an election, what is the best candidate choice for you, and it may be you. So Margie?
Thank you. And I want, good evening, and I want, on behalf of the AAUW and the Morgan Hill Library, I want to welcome you to our program. 2018 is a really important year in Morgan Hill community. We now have districts for both the city council and the school board. We have 2 positions up for election in the city council of Morgan Hill and 4 positions for the school district. We also have the role of mayor that's up for election. This program is intended to explain and demystify the process of running as a candidate or participating in supporting someone that you believe would be a good candidate. On the back page, you'll find links. Okay, at the back page of your program, you'll find links for resources for a campaign and a link to the community section of our AAUW website, Morgan Hill website, which has more detailed resources and a whole packet of information for people who are interested in running or helping with the campaign. You do not need to take detailed notes because we have all these other resources available for you. There also will be time at the end of the presentations for questions for the panel. If you have a question, jot it down on the card in your brochure so that you can remember what you wanted to know more about. I also want to remind members of the audience that there are many ways to serve our community in non-elected positions. Some of these are on the back page, and others may be found on our AAUW Morgan Hill website, as well as the city and the school websites. For those who are not ready to run, attending city council meetings, advisory committee meetings, and school board meetings are a great way to learn more about our community, how our community has become such a great place to live. And I'd like to introduce our panel now. First is Kristina Turner, who's our Morgan Hill City Manager, and she's going to outline the voting districts for elected officials for City Council and the school district. Next, we'll have Steve Tate, who will be up on video. He's not able to be here with us, but had done a video to explain his role as mayor, and he was also a past city councilman. Greg Sellers is a former Morgan Hill City Council member, and he's going to present the responsibilities and rewards of service in that role, as well as other civic engagement. Peter Mandel is a former Morgan Hill Unified School District trustee, and he'll present the responsibilities and rewards of service as a member of the school board. Linda Tullett is interim elections division coordinator for the Registrar of Voters in Santa Clara County, and she'll outline some resources available for candidates and campaign deadlines and filing requirements. Dan Harney is a current city council member and will discuss running a local campaign. I also would like to invite anybody who has been an elected member in the past or is a current elected member to stand and identify themselves and say hi to us. I know there's several.
Donna B. Bush. I'm currently on the Morgan Hill Unified School District Board of Education.
Bob Benevento, past member of the Board of Education.
Margie Lee, former city council member here in Morgan Hill.
And where?
Morgan Hill.
Oh. Beth Wyman, former city council member, mayor, city council, Morgan Hill.
Brian Sullivan, former board member of the charter school.
Thank you. Thank you all. So I'd like to introduce Kristina to begin our presentations.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Is the microphone working? Yeah. Okay, great. So I was appointed as city manager in October of last year. Prior to that, I was assistant city manager since March of 2016. And prior to that, for about 10 years, I worked for the city of Gilroy, where Dan Harney is now. So tonight my focus is going to be on the districting, and then just talk a little bit about the council manager form of government. So last year marked a pretty significant time for us in changing how elections are going to work. We basically were we were given legal paperwork that basically stated that we had to go to districts, and so we had different options. We could have fought and not gone in that direction, but it was determined that that was the best for our city to do that. And so we went through a process by hiring a demographer and basically working with the community, and we had online tools so that the community could submit different maps and different options. And so there were multiple sessions and public hearings where the community came out and council heard from the community about what the different districts should look like. And so the maps over here for first one is for Morgan Hill City Council, and one of the most significant things is the maps were drawn in such a way that each of the existing council members would have their unique district. So there wasn't two current council members that were in the same district. So that's super important. And next, there's 4, as you can see, and that's because the council seats are by district. However, the mayor will remain at large. And so that means all voters in Morgan Hill will vote for the mayor. The mayor can come from any of the districts. And then as far as the districting goes, voters within the district will vote for candidates within their district. And so in order to be, run for office, one has to live within that district. And so this is going to become relevant for us in this year's elections. So in November, we have 2 seats that are open. One is Caitlin Robinette Yakovovich, and then we also have Rich Constantine's seat that is open. And the mayor, if he decides to not run that seat, will be open, but once again, that will be at large. Now, Morgan Hill Unified School District has already gone through this process once. In 2018, they'll have 4 seats open, and then 3 in 2020. And so it's going to be interesting to see how districting, if districting really impacts, how we go about, local governance. Right now, each of our council members serve the community at large. So they're not, talking about, oh, well, this is my district, and so let's make sure X, Y, and Z happens. And you see that in cities where districting happens. So that's one dynamic that could change into the future. Just a little bit about council manager form of government, if you will. So the city council appoints two positions. One is the city manager, myself, and one is the city attorney. And so those two positions are appointed by the council, and so I, as a city manager, report into the mayor and the council members. And then we have two other positions that at this time are also elected like the council. So we have our city clerk, Irma Torres, and then we have our city treasurer, David Klink. And so those are 4-year positions. Somewhat unique now to Morgan Hill. Most cities have kind of transitioned to having those positions appointed. When I was in the city of Gilroy, I was the finance director, and so by virtue of being the finance director, I was also the treasurer. But here we have David Klink, who serves as the treasurer. It's a part-time position. There's limited roles and responsibilities that they have. Same thing with Irma as the elected clerk. In the third row, I guess it is, we have Michelle Wilson here. Many of you may know her. So she's our deputy city clerk. She is the one that is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the clerk's office. So when and if you're interested in running for office, you will be working very closely with Michelle. And then we also have tonight here Maureen Tobin. Most of you probably know her as well. She's our communications and engagement manager, very involved in outreach to the community. And she helped us immensely in our engagement process when we went through the districting. The year ahead, the next several months ahead, are busy for those that are going to run for office. From the city's perspective, we typically will host an evening where we invite candidates in to learn about city government. Just from our perspective, what are the areas that you should be aware of? What does the budget look like? How do city finances work? And so we put on a workshop, and I believe Gilroy does the same. And then just looking at Dan, one of my favorite memories about Dan was when he was interested in being appointed to the position of council. I remember getting a call from Dan, and that's can be common where Dan wanted to understand the budget, and so he called me up, and it was very clear that he had gone through the capital budget, he'd gone through the operations budget, and he had specific questions for me, and I knew right away that Dan would make a good council member, very interested and just wanted the knowledge, wanted to know how things worked, and so I welcome that. But we'll have one formal night set aside for that sort of workshop. So I'll be happy to answer your questions when we get to the Q&A time.
Thank you. Now I'll introduce our mayor and
First of all, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to this session, and I'm very pleased to be with you, though it is on video instead of live. I'm here to talk about what it involves to be on the council or to be mayor of the city. I'll give you a little bit of perspective on what's involved. What you see of the city council is that they meet 2 or 3 times a month in the city council chambers and discuss things that are put on an agenda that come up and that kind of thing. But that is not even a shallow bit of what you do when you serve on the council or as mayor. The council is just very, very deeply involved in preparing for those meetings, going over the background material. It takes a great deal of time aside from the meeting itself to really understand the agenda and the options that are being presented and the policy kinds of decisions that need to be made during the meeting. So the better prepared you come, the better the outcome is going to be for the public, which is what we're all about. So that the meetings are a big part of it, and it's not just being at the meeting, it's preparing for the meeting in depth. But then there's also so many other things that the council members are involved with. We all have outside assignments, and I'll use mine for an example. mine. I'm on the Library Joint Powers Authority. I've been on that ever since I was elected to the council in 1998, so I have a great deal of experience. But that is made up of 11 different cities that each have a library that is run by the Santa Clara County Library System. And we have a policy-making body made up of elected officials from each of those 11 cities. And we meet, I think, about every other month. Sometimes it's less frequent and sometimes more frequent. And things that have come up over the years with that, I've been involved as a campaign manager for extending the parcel tax for the library on a couple of different occasions. When we got our new library, when we went through the process of figuring out how we were going to do that and then got into the building of the library, what's the design supposed to be, and that kind of thing, you're just very, very involved in that. Other assignments that I have, I'm on the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board. That is, again, 11 different cities, not the same ones as the library, but 11 different cities that banded together to offer clean energy, replacing the generation of the power that PG&E used to provide. They still provide the transportation of that energy to your home and the billing for it and those kind of things, but your energy now is supplied by Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and we have 11 different elected representatives from their city that go to a board meeting once a month. Happens to be on tonight. This is February 14th when I'm speaking to you, and so we're going to meet tonight and go over, all the things that a board has to do. We have the new election of a chair and a vice chair, and we have to certify something in terms of the financials of the organization. The audit has taken place, and so that has to be certified. And that's just like a city council packet. You're reading a packet of materials that you have to get ready for, just as you do with the Library Joint Powers Authority. So those are examples of outside assignments. Those are a couple that I'm on. Every single council member has outside assignments. We have a Joint Powers Authority with the city of Gilroy for our sewage treatment plant down there. So that's called the South County, I'll get this right. Anyway, Wastewater Authority. The Wastewater Authority is down in Gilroy. We have a Joint Powers where we appoint 2 of our council members, they appoint 2 of their council members, and also their city manager is the manager of that authority. So that the whole running of the sewer plant is something that the city council is involved with, and other kinds of things. Huge is Valley Transportation Authority. The Valley Transportation Authority has representatives from the county, not for every city. They do it a little bit different. They pair some of the cities together. Some of them have 3 of them paired together or joined together. And so they have a board of, I think, 9 people total, where San Jose has multiple representatives. I think they have 4 representatives on the board. For South County, we pair with Gilroy, so it's Gilroy and Morgan Hill representing South County, and our council member Larry Carr has been the board member representing both cities for the past 3 or 4 years. Before that, it was a representative from Gilroy, the representative. And there again, they have monthly meetings. They have a huge packet that they get every month, and we have meetings. Larry and I sit down with representatives from the Valley Transportation Agency before the monthly board meeting to understand what's in the packet and what affects South County and what kinds of things we want to do about that. And then there's sub-meetings of the Valley Transportation Authority with Caltrain. There's a board meeting for Caltrain that's up in Redwood City area, I think, somewhere up the peninsula that meets once every couple of months that we sometimes need to go to. So there are meetings that council members do go to represent the city at the county level. We go to quite a few of the county meetings. just more and more things that the council members are involved in. And we haven't even started to talk about the outside things that we do here in Morgan Hill. We try to be with the Chamber of Commerce when they welcome new businesses to the city. We're always spokesmen at different kinds of events. Most recently, we had the announcement of the Amgen Tour of California. So we had a press conference last week where nobody really asked me to speak, but I was expected to speak. And as I walked into there, they handed me my speaking points that I try to cover and that kind of thing. So there's just a lot of that kind of stuff that is expected, especially of the mayor. The mayor is kind of considered the figurehead for the city that is usually the spokesman when he's available to do so, but frequently I'm not available, and then the mayor pro tem, this year Rich Constantine as mayor pro tem, would substitute for me. And we do that. There are backups for all the assignments that we make of the city council members. So it's a huge job, but I'll tell you, it is an extremely rewarding job. I am just, it's really fulfilled me to have this second career. I had a career with IBM in marketing, and now I've had a career with the city of Morgan Hill as being an elected city council member and the elected mayor for the past 12 years, and it's been just a wonderful, wonderful experience. Never know what to expect. I come into the office every day. Usually I get 1 or 2 phone calls a day, people wanting to know something, people having problems with their projects that they want me to intervene on, find out the status of. Recently we had the neighbors on the very north end of Morgan Hill complaining about the odors coming from the mushroom farm, the Monterey mushroom farm up the road. So what are we expected to do with a facility that's not located within our jurisdiction, and who do we work with to make that happen? So cultivating relationships is a huge part of the job, and a really fun part of the job, getting to know legislators at all levels, all the way up to Congressman Zoe Lofgren. Very, very close relationship with Mike Wasserman at the county level, keeping on board, and he spends a great deal of time down here looking at situations that are common to the cities and himself, and so we're very involved in keeping up with him and so many other organizations. We have our partner organizations, the YMCA that helps run the outdoor sports, the Centennial Recreation Center. We have our fire department is manned by CAL FIRE. So we have partnerships like that, and then we have partnerships that are not quite so tight as those are that we always have to manage. We don't decide what kind of land we can annex into the city. We have to work through something called the Local Area Formation Commission. So those are 7 elected representatives, 6 elected representatives and 1 that is appointed to this commission that makes the decisions on what land we can, or any other city within the county, can annex. It's a county-wide commission. So those are the kind of relationships we try to build up and do things with, these people, so that we get to know them personally and can really sit down and talk to them one-on-one and influence things for the betterment of Morgan Hill, which is really what it's all about. So I've had a lot of fun over the 20 years, I guess it'll be at the end of this year, being somebody who wants to see our city grow in the right way and keep its character and just, be a delightful place to live, have a very high quality of life. And I think we're being pretty successful in doing that. And that's why anybody would run. They want to make their community better. That's why you run for office. That's what it's all about. And the rewards that you get, the self-fulfillment that you get from doing that job is just so much appreciated, and really makes it a lot of fun.
Greg Selvers is going to talk to us about, and he's a former Morgan Hill City Council member. He's going to talk to us about the responsibilities and rewards of service as a city council member. Thank you.
And everyone can hear?
Yep.
To the back? That was perfect. When I was on the city council, I always went before the mayor. We always had the informal tradition that I always speak before them and other council members, and he would always make his comments last. So it's a little bit awkward for me to go before Steve, or after Steve. So in thinking about it, and this is actually perfect because his comments were much more about the specifics in terms of time, in terms of commitment, in terms of the types of activities you have to be involved in. And I thought, well, let me think about it in a little bit different way and think about the commitment than a personal commitment and more of a visceral, kind of person that you are, what it's going to do to you to be an elected, what kinds of qualities as an individual you may or may not want to have. And so I thought I'd kind of focus on those kind of details and the things that I noticed that were really significant. I had a good friend who recently has been very active in the community, and I said, you ought to think about running. And he said, probably about a half hour into my first meeting, I would probably not be able to stop telling everybody exactly what I thought of them, and I'd walk out, and that'd be the end of it. And I said, you may want to think about another way to serve than being on the city council then. So you have to, but the first thing that I strongly urge people is you have to have a real good sense of who you are, where are you coming from, and what do you stand for. It seems kind of obvious, but a lot of times, especially for local office, it seems like, well, my kid's in school, and I've been active anyway, maybe I'll just be on the school board, or, I just think it'd be neat to say I'm a city council member, and I've got time on my hands on Wednesday night, so why not? But inevitably, you're thrown like a leaf in the wind, inevitably, and very quickly. And next thing you know, there's a controversial vote, and it's 2 on one side and 2 on the other, and everybody looks at you and says, all right, what do you think? And if all you want to do is make everybody happy and not upset the people, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And eventually, it catches up with you. So that's the first thing. But I think, but there's a lot of other things within that as well. So for instance, when I was first on the city council, one of our colleagues had made a conscious decision. Slow growth was her big issue. And so she made a conscious decision that she wasn't going to take any money from developers, which makes sense, but also that she was not even going to talk to developers. But she didn't want to meet with them separately because she was worried about how that might influence her or how it might be perceived. That was an important thing for her, but it influenced the kind of information she got and how people dealt with her. And so those are the kinds of things you kind of got to think through. Who are you going to take money from? Who are you going to be affiliated with? And that'll influence how people consider you and your role in the council. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is to not underestimate the toll that it'll take on people around you, close to you. Sometimes I think it was easier for, Marvy's snickering over here, both of us, thinking about our spouses and our friends and family. And inevitably, you're going to, and especially in Morgan Hill, I spent time in City Hall in San Francisco working in the staff of one of the, and it was much more of a blood sport, frankly, in San Francisco. They would just, two people would feel the exact same way, and they'd still take each other on. But in Morgan Hill, I always felt blessed because here, you had to be responsible for your positions because you're going to end up going to Nob Hill, and next thing you know, you're going to run into somebody else, and you're going to have to explain yourself, and if you were obnoxious to them or treated them poorly on the dais or didn't respect them or whatever, that's going to all come out. So I think that was always, but the toll, like I said, the external toll, if conversely, your spouse or your mom or whoever, kids are in school, and you take a position that goes one way and everybody else feels the other way, and suddenly people are getting, approached that and they don't necessarily want to deal with politics, that's something to think about. And also internally, we used to, the meetings go on really long. I would get done, and I had a good friend who was a former mayor who said, it took me an hour to wind down when I got home from the council meeting. I thought, well, that's silly. And the first time, 6 months into my council term, it took me an hour to get wind down from the council meeting. It was just the way it worked. And so I would never have dinner until I got home, and sometimes I'd have dinner at midnight. But it was a way to just kind of you know, for me being Italian, you know, food and comfort are all, so it was a way to calm down, and it was a way to do that. So, but the point is then my spouse had to, you know, so he had to sit up and wait for me, and it just, you know, created issues that you have to deal with. So you have to think about those kinds of tolls as well. And then the last thing that I would just tell people, I used to have a mantra which was count to 3. I tell this story that a lot of the facilities, including this one, that everybody thinks are so wonderful and so amazing, every one of them was incredibly controversial. The library almost was built downtown. It almost was built where the community center is. I mean, the recreation center is. The recreation center almost didn't get built because it was very controversial as to whether or not it would be affordable, who's going to run it, how are we going to do this. The outdoor sports complex was amazingly complex and convoluted and had full of controversy. So was the community center. Every single one of them, and there's not a single vote that was 5-0. In fact, I often, when I want to give Steve a hard time, point out that he and I were on the opposite side of most of them. What he did, because he was very anxious about the fiscal issues, and so what he would do is he would say afterwards, look, once the vote was taken and we decided to move forward, we're all going to do everything we can to make this thing work. But the point of it is, I would make a very conscious effort, and I felt very strongly about building those facilities. You have to count to 3. Like, how do we get enough support to get 3 people at least on the council to say, yes, we want to move forward with this? Because if you can't, and some people just want to make a statement and say, I'm going to take this stand, and you know, that's the way it's going to be, and that's fine too, but you have to make a conscious effort. And because if you get to 3, sometimes you don't get 100% of what you want if you want to get that 3rd vote, or 4th or 5th, or however many you need. So those are a few things thoughts that I had about being on the council, and just to think about in terms of a more personal and specific things to think about. I'd strongly encourage folks to do it. I think I was mentioning to Beth, a former mayor and a friend since I was a little kid. I have to point out that, and I said, you know, people ask, well, did you have fun on the council? And I said, I would never use that word. But it was satisfying, and it was fulfilling, and to be able to go around town and see all the works that we've done, and then even better to have free, you know, Wednesday nights now. It's very satisfying.
Peter Mandel's going to talk to us about being on the school board and what the responsibilities and rewards have been.
So I thought we'd start with a song. All the tenors and sopranos.
Yeah.
No, but, I'm surrounded by city people here. And yet, there is nothing that is more viscerally important to the people in our community than their children. And so, you know, as Greg pointed out, you know, you walk through Safeway, he goes, no, I go to Safeway. I know the symbolism of that. But you know, you can't go to Safeway without being stopped and talk with somebody about something because something happened with that school about their child, and it's all encompassing. So, some thoughts. First, why do this? That's really important. And you'd be surprised how many candidates I've talked to over the years when I ask, well, why are you doing this? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Nothing in particular. I thought it would be interesting. I care about kids. I know all about schools because I attended them. There's a lot of that. And so, so be clear in your own mind about what your motivation is for going and running for school board or for any of these positions. I mean, for myself, just to personalize this, you know, nothing is more important in the education of my children and youth. As much as I love land use issues, kids are where the action is, and education is fascinating. And so, to me, that was a big motivational factor. Another factor was, I wanted to set a good example for my own children. My kids were in school. I wanted them to see that I was willing and that, you know, that their parents give back to the community. So I had motivations, I had interests, and there were a number of big issues on the table when I started that I had strong opinions about. So think about it. What are your motivations? Why are you really running? What do you want to accomplish? Because You want to run, don't run because you want to be a trustee or you want to be a council member. That is meaningless. Second, don't be a single issue candidate. There are a lot of people who run because they care about a thing. You're going to be there for 4 years. That thing is going to show up on the agenda a couple of times. And then if you're running as a single issue candidate, you're going to be bored for 4 years or ineffectual or uninvolved. And so even if you care strongly about, don't be a person who cares about getting, that because you got into a fight over a charter school, that you're going to go and fight about a charter school and that's why you're going to run. You can address the board, you can take action many other ways. Don't do this just because you have one issue. Because just for your own sanity, you've got 4 years to sit there, and if you're just one issue, it's not going to be fulfilling. It will take time. You've heard this as a theme, and Steve talked about it. Greg spoke about it. Don't estimate how much time this would take. You've got a feeling from Greg and Steve what takes time in the city council. In the school board, you've got a lot of homework to do. You get tons and tons of agenda background materials and so on, staff reports, all this stuff. You've got to read all of that, understand it all. You've got board meetings to attend. You've got special sessions of board meetings to attend. So it's not just the Monday meetings. You've got additional ones as well. You've got agenda setting meetings, which are separate meetings where you set the agenda for those sessions. You've got meetings with the superintendent. You've got meetings with staff. You've got time to educate yourself. You've got conferences to attend. You've got discussions with the community. You've got committees to be on. I had a very satisfying time on the Corporate Yard Commission, jointly with the city, where we worked on groundwater cleanup. Wow. That was my high point. And then you'll be visiting schools. You'll be invited out to visit schools. There are school events, there's back to school nights and so on that you'll be attending just to continue to keep your finger on the pulse of the district. All of these things take time. So don't go in this thinking that you're going to attend a meeting every couple of weeks. It's a lot of time commitment. All the more reason to do this only if you really enjoy it. It'll take time. It'll take tact. Everyone disagrees. Everyone disagrees. If you've ever been to a recent board meeting, you'll notice that everyone disagrees. And that's great, and that's valuable. But you have to disagree respectfully. And if you do that, you can actually have a tremendous relationship with the people that you work with on the board, in the community, on the staff, with unions. You can have a really good, interesting relationship with them. And you don't have to agree as long as you stay respectful. So if your personality is to be confrontational, this is not a good spot for you. Very likely you're not even going to like many of these other people that you're working with. You got to be okay with that and deal with them respectfully and learn from them, because they all have insights to offer. Just be ready to know what you're getting yourself into. Greg already mentioned this, learn to count votes. He only had to learn to count to 3. We have to learn to count to
4.
Hang on. 4. Because a single trustee has no power to do anything. This is a well-known phrase amongst trustees, but to you, when you show up, you think you can get things done because you were just elected and you're on the school board. You have no power to get anything done. You only have power to get things done if 3 other people agree with you. If you can get to 4, you can get a lot done. And so building those coalitions is really fundamental to getting anything accomplished. So if you want to be a hellraiser, if you want to be an obstructionist, that's fine. You can spend 4 years, accomplish nothing. If you want to get anything done, you need to work well with the other members of the board in order to at least get those 4 votes. You have to be constructive with leadership. Just as in the city model, where the city council appoints you and then you run the city, same thing, the trustees hire the superintendent runs things. If you don't get along well with the superintendent, you're not going to get anything done. You've got to build a relationship with the superintendent and the staff if you want to get things done. If you just want to be a jerk, That's easy. You don't have to get along with anybody. You can just be a rabble-rouser and an obstructionist, and maybe that'll make you feel good. But if you're going on the board in order to truly accomplish something, to do something for kids, to do something to improve the schools, if you really want to accomplish something, the way things get accomplished is with the city, with the city and with the district staff and with the district leadership. The superintendent, the assistant superintendents, deputy superintendents. These are the people you have to work with to get things accomplished, to get your agenda implemented. So you have to know that they will want to work with you. So it's important to realize that. If not, you're going to be very frustrated, or you'll be in the job for the wrong reasons. As a side note, you could also go in the job with the intention of changing the leadership. So that's, sometimes people run because they don't like the leadership. They don't like the superintendent, the staff, this, that. That's fine. That could be the necessary. But if you do that, realize that you're going to lose, out of your 4-year term, roughly 1.5 years to 2 years of any accomplishment at all. Because it takes a long time to move somebody out. Then you have to probably bring in an interim leader. Then you're going to have to go and do a search. Then you're going to have to go do contract negotiations with this new person. The new person will get in. They'll have to figure out who everybody is. I mean, nothing will happen in the district for 2 years. Maybe that damage is necessary. But don't go into this thinking that by changing leadership you're going to get a lot done. The opposite will be true. You'll go into the office and nothing will happen for years and years because of that decision. I'm not saying it's not necessarily the right decision or the wrong decision. Just know what you're getting yourself into by making those kind of choices. I'm wrapping up, honestly. And wait for the song. It's going to be good. I'll also mention that it's a very weird way to work. I mean, I work in corporate America, and there's norms in corporate America. Going into a government entity like a board or a council is just so weird, largely because of open meeting laws. You can't talk to other trustees about anything that's of substance, because then you are conferring on things outside of an open meeting. So if you're standing at the side of the room and 3 other trustees gather around you, you have to stop talking, because then you have 4 people, which is a quorum, and therefore you could be discussing things and reaching conclusions outside of a public meeting. This is a weird way to live, and you think that you'll get a lot done. You'll talk to people, you'll pick up the phone, you'll talk to your other council members. You really can't. All of the time you're going to spend is going to be in that meeting, in that board meeting, and having those kind of conversations. So it's an unusual way of working. So know that you can deal with that, because the open meeting implications make it unusual. You can't also, for all of that we're going to tell you about what to expect, you're going to run into a lot of stuff that's unexpected. Are you going to try and approve a bond? It's not on the agenda, but you might decide to do that. That's going to be a big distraction for a long time. Are you going to have a charter application come to your school board? That can be a big deal. You don't know if that's going to happen. It might. Is somebody going to come to school one day wearing a T-shirt with an American flag on it on Cinco de Mayo and try and cause trouble? That can be very distracting. That can get you on Rush Limbaugh. I was so excited that we were all talked about on Rush. I mean, we were on every conservative radio program because of that controversy. That consumed us for weeks. You don't anticipate these things. So know going into this that there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen that you don't know that's going to happen, and just be ready for it. Finally, enjoy it. I found working on the school board to be just a hell of a lot of fun. I enjoyed who I worked with, even the union leadership, which was done at that time. Were fun to work with. We didn't get along, we didn't agree, but it was fun to work with them. Looking back, this is a little emotional in a sense, but looking back on my life, my 36 years with IBM, My 8 years working in the schools, that was amazing. that was contributing, that was building, that was doing things that are really viscerally important to me, my children, the children of our district. That's what I will look back on as really fundamentally important work. Not 36 years in IBM. It was okay, paid the bills, but that, you know, so go into it knowing that that you can really enjoy it. Thank you.
This is Linda Tullett. She's going to talk to us about resources available for candidates through the Registrar of Voters and campaigns and deadlines and filing requirements, some of the nitty-gritty stuff. But don't feel like you have to write everything down because we do have links to the website that will help you.
Yes, and I hope to not make it sound as terrifying as I wanted to start out by just reading a letter. I received an email just last week from a guy who was running for Senate, and he says, "I'm writing to congratulate you on having a very dedicated and knowledgeable staff. I visited your office last week to get the documents I need to file for office. At some point during the process, I met with each one of your staff members. I really appreciate their efforts to help me because I'm a complete novice in running for any type of office," and he mentioned city, county, state. He has no idea where and how to start the process, but he was very encouraged by the help and information I received from your outstanding staff, and I hope that they are recognized for their excellent customer service. What that meant to me was that when someone comes into the office and doesn't know anything about the paperwork that we're about to give to them, that I have a good staff, they're knowledgeable, and they took the time to spend with this man. And he actually came back today, and I told him I was going to read this tonight, and he was very happy. It's his first time running for office. He's running for state senate.
Yeah.
He has no idea where the boundaries of the districts are. He didn't know what a nomination paper was. He didn't know he had a filing fee. There was so many things he didn't know, but his friends encouraged him to run because they wanted to see some change. And so he's a novice, and he's running, and he's making it work because he took the time to spend in our office and get educated. It is complicated, but that's why we're there, and that's why when if you're running for school board or a special district, you're going to come to my office or a county office or whatever it is. If you're running for a city council, you'll go to the city clerk's office. But those folks are there to help you, walk you through the process and help you understand the paperwork because it's their job and they want to see you be successful. They want to see your name get on the ballot. I think the hardest decisions you'll probably have to make when you run are what are you going to put in your 200-word candidate statement? And as we had heard earlier, it's very important to have positions and have intention and have ideas for when you're running for office. Voters will read that. It gets mailed out to every voter in your jurisdiction. So it's important to contemplate what those words will be and make sure that they do stand true to what your campaign is. In our guide, we tell you how to count words. It's not really word for word, believe it or not. Words are free. So you can use word count on your computer, but you might get some freebies. On our website, which I know on the back of that there's a long link, if you just remember sccvote.org, that's the easiest to remember, Santa Clara County Vote.org. Find the link for candidates and measures. You'll probably see a specific link then for the election you might be running for. Up there you'll see our candidate guide, which should have a lot of the generic information you're going to need to run for city. Again, the rules for ballot designations, candidate statements, there's information in there on collecting signatures, and campaign tools that you might need towards the end of your campaign. But up there as well, there's a list of office holders and who's running for office when, what their term is, when the term expires. We also have a very good team that can give you some data. You can get street index, maps of the area, lists of voters in your neighborhood. We have what you might call a precinct walking list, so you can get like the street name and then who's registered at the house, and when you go to the house, you know who you're talking to. And I tell you, as a voter myself, when a candidate comes to my door, even though I work in the office and 99% of the time I get to know who you are, and I make my judgment at that point. I don't think it's your statement. No, I do. But if you come to my door, I'm going to remember that. And I open my door and I have conversation with people. And so getting that walking list and being out there and having a face in your community, I think is huge in the campaign. I don't think a lot of candidates understand that. And if you're running for city office, you'll have to collect signatures. Why not do it yourself? You know, you can certainly have somebody help you do that, but why not do it yourself? You get to know those candidates. It's very important, I think, to understand the process before you get into it, but in the big picture, our office is there to help you, the city clerk's office is there to help you, we're there to demystify the process for you and help you understand that it's not that difficult. The nominating period, in general, it opens up about 113 days before an election. So if you're looking at, you know, November 5th or 8th or whatever it might be, count backwards by 113 days, that's going to be the opening day of your nomination period. The end of your nomination period is always going to be 88 days prior to the election. So if you're not looking at maybe this November, you might be looking at the future. If you do that math in your head, you'll pretty much figure out when showtime is and when you need to start preparing your information. One other thing I want to mention before I hand over the mic is that we do plan to have a, for lack of better terms, candidate seminar, a training, public training session or whatever, in July at some point in time. I probably won't be the one to conduct that. As I think we said earlier, I'm interim. I'm there filling the hot seat right now. My experience is I was the candidate filing officer in San Mateo County for 9 years. I worked in San Francisco for 4 years as a deputy registrar. I was the registrar of voters in Monterey County for 6.5 years. I retired in, I didn't really retire because I'm not older. I left my job in 2013, but I'm back helping. Shannon Boucher is a good friend of mine. She called, I answered. So I'm there to help her, but I probably won't be the person to run the candidate seminar. That's probably going to be sometime in early July. Your filing period will open July 16th for this year. But take a look at our website. You know, understand the tools that are out there. Call the office. There's a lot of information that is available to you that you might not be aware of. Ask during the filing period. You know, once you know you're ready to go, reach out again to us and we'll try to help you through that. You can also look for old candidate statements, look at old ballot designations, see what people did in the past, see what helped them be successful in getting those votes. So just want to make sure that you understand that it's easy. It's again, your biggest decisions, your candidate statement, and what you're going to tell people you are on the ballot. And usually that's 3 words, no more than 3 words that describe your current principal profession. School teacher, grocery clerk, whatever you might want to be. We even have homemaker if you're at home and you don't have a current profession. Community volunteer is another one. So there's a myriad of options for you that you can use to describe yourself on the ballot to voters so they understand who you are. Well, okay.
Dan, did you want to be next?
Yeah.
There is.
Listen, can everyone hear me? If everyone can hear me, I'll skip the mic. I'm Dan Harney, and I am a city council member at the city of Gilroy, and I'm also the recently appointed pro tem mayor, or mayor pro tem, I should say. And I've lost an election. I've ran a couple of races, one of which was the AAUW race that I ran. That was one of the most important races because it got me back into running. And so thank you to the AAUW. In fact, I met you at the Morgan Hill coffee shop, and I told you one day I'm going to run that race.
I remember.
There you go. So you never know who you're going to run into. But let me just tell you briefly my story. I'm looking at the clock. I got 10 minutes and about 12 slides to go through. But I'm originally from Canada, born and raised in Canada, and I moved to the United States 15 years ago, and I never changed my citizenship. I've got 3 children. I've got a daughter who's 10, a son who's 8, and a new baby who's almost 2. And I remember there was some controversy going on in Gilroy. My wife and I decided to move from Morgan Hill down to Gilroy. And there was some controversy there about growth and how the city council was not listening to what the residents wanted. And a lot of the residents felt that it was all rigged. And as a result of that, I wanted to get involved. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was really my first race. Our mayor, Don Gage, had recently announced his retirement. Perry Woodward had moved up from city council member to mayor, leaving his spot open. And I was a newcomer. Nobody knew me in town. I didn't volunteer for anything, and I said, this is an opportunity. I went out, I got my U.S. citizenship on November 15th, and then I dropped my application in, and, Dawn retired in mid-December. The application opened up for council members, people interested in the council. I put my application in, and before I even voted in my first election, I was appointed to the city council. So that was my first race. Now, but I think you guys want to hear about the second race, and you know, Steve and Peter and Greg, they've all put it so eloquently. I'll talk about deciding to run. I'll talk a little bit about preparing to be a candidate, and then the power of time, influence, and money that it has on winning a campaign. Some of the mistakes that I made was not understanding those 3 things: time, money, and influence. But when you decide to run, there's a lot of motivating factors, and I think Greg and Peter both mentioned them, right? Are you going to run for a seat because you want to add your skills and broaden the skills of the board, or are you running against the current administration and trying to make a big difference? Maybe you want to kick everyone out. I don't know. You'll have to decide on your own. Maybe you feel really strongly about an upcoming policy or an issue. That's how I felt. I felt, well, hang on a second. My voice does count, and the voice of the community does count, and I feel strongly about that. And even if I lose, I'm going to get my voice heard. Or maybe you want to make a career out of politics, something that I certainly don't want to do, because as I found out once being on the city council, I think I make about 75 cents an hour. It's not a well-paying job. But so ask yourself, why are you going to run? And then take a moment, probably like a weekend, and start thinking about what are your positions. Who are you as a candidate? What are your positions? Write them down and distill those positions down and align them to your core beliefs. You know, Greg talked about this earlier. What are they? Do you really believe in strong land use management? Do you really believe in fiscal conservatism? What are your core beliefs that you want to bring to the council and communicate out and make policy decisions on? Because as you'll see, as you go along your campaign, those positions actually become your campaign foundations. So if you don't know what your core beliefs are, then it becomes very, very difficult to be true to those issues, and that becomes very visible to the constituents who are going to be voting for you. But it also helps explain why you're running, right? So, you know, that's something that I didn't necessarily do during my first real campaign, because I thought, hey, I'm on the council, I know what the issues are, I know what problems I want to solve, but I didn't really take the time to understand what it meant to run and why I was running again. And you really want to be able to differentiate yourself from other people that are running. So preparing to win, first thing you should do is form a committee. Guess what I didn't do my first campaign? I didn't form a committee. I said, I'm going to go at this alone. I had a brand new baby, and I was working for eBay at the time, and eBay just passed a policy that said you get 3 months off. Your job is protected, you've got full pay, full benefits. So I said, that's it. I'm going to canvass all the neighborhoods. I knocked on 3,000 doors myself, right? But I didn't form a committee. What you want to do with that committee is you want to identify what talents you need on your committee, the things that you don't have. Maybe you don't know how to design a website. Maybe you don't know how to communicate. Maybe you don't know how to do a design for your logo. This was my design, and what I learned after the campaign is this didn't resonate with anyone. Does anyone know what this is?
Fireplace?
Yeah, it's a tree. It's the tree from Gilroy Gardens. And I thought this was the most clever thing in the world. You notice my name is really small?
Yeah.
So this is the worst design in the world. So when you're building your committee, you want to bring talent onto your committee that's going to help you win. You want to establish the roles and responsibilities. Swanee said, I don't know where Swanee is, she's somebody's treasurer. My wife was my treasurer, and I don't want to throw her under the bus here, but she said, I'm not doing anything for you because I'm raising a family while you do this. And that was a big, big part of my campaign. She ran the family while I tried to do the treasury. And it turned out to be okay, Kristina. I was only $29 off. Because now my new treasurer came and said, where's the 29 bucks, Dan? Maybe I bought bagels or something. But you want to prepare a timeline. And as the person from the voter register said, that timeline, you really need to start working in reverse. So if you know the election is November 11th, you know what the filing dates are, you know when the campaign opens, you know you've got to get 50 signatures, you know you've got to do 3 weeks of design work, you know you've got printing, you know you've got mailers. You need to plot all of that out on a timeline and start saying, these are my goals for this week, this month, or you know, the next little while. And you have to prepare a budget, right? Which brings us into the 3 winning requirements, right? Time, money, and influence. So I talked a little bit about the time, but I think one of the most important things that you have to consider is, what is this time requirement going to be on your family? As I said, I've got a very, very young family, and you're always away.
Yeah.
When you're campaigning, it becomes very, very difficult. I missed my daughter's birthday, and she will not let me forget that. So it becomes very difficult, and I say that with emotion because it's true. You're really sacrificing a lot for your community, and if you don't have your core beliefs, then you're really wasting your time. So think about the time, think about the commitment, and make sure you talk about that with your family. Don't underestimate the time because it's not renewable. The time is ticking and ticking and ticking and ticking, and before you know it, the election is here. Questions to ask yourself: does your team know what your timeline is? Right? In my case, I knew what my timeline was because I was working alone, but today my team is telling me what my timeline is and where I should be. You really want somebody on your team to be managing you, right? Because your job is to really raise money and to get to know people. You want to be exposed. You want to be out in front of the community, talking about your beliefs, talking about why you're running, talking about the difference you want to make in the community. You don't want to be worrying about all the background stuff. And so who is managing your time or your calendar, and how are you going to balance that work life with your family and your career and your campaign? Those are like 3 really tough things to do. If you don't have a good employer that understands that you need to step away at certain times, or you don't have any PTO, then it's going to be very, very difficult to run a successful campaign. And finally, you know, this is an important one. Can you hold your own committee members to your timeline? If they promise you a website by a certain date, do they get it done? Do they get your 460 filings done on time? Right? So time is very, very critical. Factor number 2 is money. And I've prepared a small budget here that I'll show you, but it takes a lot of money to run a successful campaign. Anybody who's run one for city council can tell you that. So the first thing you should really do is sit down and understand, what do you want to do and how are you going to get your message out for your campaign? Are you going to run large signs throughout the community? Are you going to have lawn signs? A lawn sign is about $6 to print, $2 for the state, that's $8. Are you running 100 of those, or are you running 300 of those? Big difference. It's 800 versus 2,400. Are you going to have little buttons? Are you going to have cards? Are you going to have door hangers? I brought examples. These are all from my own campaign, so you could take them and throw them away when you're done with them. But you know, here's something that I would leave at every door I knocked on, or every discussion I went to. It has information about who I am, what my priorities are, and who's endorsed me on the back. Okay? But they cost money. can't remember what they were, maybe 75 cents. You have to decide, are you going to go with a union print shop or are you going to go with a local print shop? I can't remember who said it, but when you get stopped at Safeway or Nob Hill, somebody's going to ask you, right? Maybe a party is going to ask you. So those are all things you have to consider. Are you going to hire a consultant? I didn't hire a consultant. I thought I could just do it myself. Most people hire a consultant. That's $6,000 on average, $6,000 to $12,000. How many mailers are you going to run? You know those little mailers you get right during an election? Those are about, in Gilroy, those are about $8,000 a pop. Okay, are you going to run 1, 2, 3, and what time are you going to send those out? Is it going to be before or after the absentee voters? Polling data is also very important. So these are all things that you need to consider, and one of the things I didn't consider was how much was postage, right? Even just sending thank you letters and thank you notes and asking people for money, that all costs money, right? So your budget is your fundraising goal. That's what you should focus on. And your main focus is meeting people, as many people as possible, and trying to get their endorsement and a donation at the same time. And what I found is you may be trying to get the big donations, but it's those small $25, $15, $50 donations that really, really add up. When you've got several pages on your 460, that tells you that your community is supporting you. And you've got, you know, a good nest egg to work for. Asking for money is very hard. But really, if somebody doesn't have time to give you, to volunteer or canvas, it's really the best thing they can do for you. Factor number 3 is influence. Your candidate statement becomes very, very important. It is, I think it's, you said 200 words. I struggled with that. That took me like a week and a half to write, right? Because I knew that was going to go out to the voters, and whatever they read was probably going to end up affecting my results. So again, know why you're running, know what your cause is, and know what is going to influence the voters. If you're for high-speed rail coming through downtown Morgan Hill, that's going to impact some voters, and it's not going to impact other voters, right? I'm dealing with the same issue in Gilroy, and quite frankly, that's a really, really difficult one. So if you put that in your statement or you campaign on that, you better be prepared for what's going to happen. So the focus is all about influencing others on why you are the best choice. A little typo there. And then you want to channel all of your campaign time informing people on those positions, right? And again, it comes back to to sitting down at the beginning of the year and deciding why you're running, what are your core beliefs, and are they going to change? I can tell you a few things about what changed in my campaign and some of the things I learned being on council, and understand that, if you stop growth, then you stop income for the city, and maybe that's not necessarily a good thing. But set up as many meet and greets as you possibly can. Don't underestimate the power of going to somebody's backyard and talking to 10 of their friends, right? It doesn't have to be a big launch campaign. It doesn't have to be hundreds of people. You probably won't get 100 people showing up anyways. Don't forget about if you're invited to a debate, or to, I was invited to Gavilan College and there was about 80 students there, right? So think about that. Ask your friends and family for 30 minutes of their time so that they can get to know you a little bit. And then ask them to pay it forward for you and set something up in their backyard, or over wine. Wine's always fun. Make sure your message in print, online, and other pieces are consistent and clear. So my website isn't developed because we're going back and forth on what is the message, right? I know what my top 2 are, but there's going to be a third priority, and we're not quite clear what that is at this point. A lot of things change, right? So, but you want to make sure that in your print campaign and your online campaign, and when you're doing interviews or when you're going to the South County Realtors Association, that you're clear and you're consistent about that. One of the things I ran on was, we needed to improve efficiencies at City Hall. I told the Realtors Association that, and then I backed that up this past year in our budget by approving a $5 million budget to improve our infrastructure. So be clear and be prepared for debates and anticipate questions about your positions. You better know them, right? Because people can see through you. And then always leave your voters with a piece that you've developed, whether it's a trifold, whether it's a door hanger, whether it's a business card. Final thoughts. Time, money, and influence are the three things that win campaign. Be prepared to talk about yourself a lot. I was a little uncomfortable about that. Be prepared to ask for money. Very uncomfortable. You don't know what people are dealing with in their private life. Maybe they want to support you but can't. Maybe they will support you and they're going to give you a lot more than you expected. But be prepared to ask for that money. You'll be criticized. You'll be questions about your past. I don't know if anyone's had that happen to them, but the past comes up. It might even come up to haunt you. Fortunately, all of my past was in Canada before the internet. You know, you'll be personally attacked, and it's going to be really, you'll be in for some really uncomfortable situations. Tell me about this time because it wasn't consistent with this vote, and you have to be prepared for that. But most of all, make sure your family is ready to support you, and take time to thank them. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. I wanted to take a minute to let you know about two things that might help you if you are considering a run as a candidate. One, there is a funding website called CrowdPack, and it is a free website where you can maybe direct people to. And lots of times if you're only considering and you're trying to look at the feasibility of gathering enough money to be able to operate a campaign, they can use their credit cards and it won't be charged until you've actually filed for candidacy. So that's one thing. The other thing, there's a new law in California. I live in a homeowners association that has a clubhouse. And most clubhouses now, you have to have a rental fee and then a cleaning deposit. It's against the law in California for them to charge fees for a community issue or political meeting with someone who lives in that community. It would have to be operated by someone with that community. But I just want you to be aware of that there are resources that don't cost any money too. So anyway, we do have a microphone for people. Jenny, you want to? Sure.
Thank you for all that information. It was really an interesting meeting. I'm wondering, Dan talked about cost, and I'm wondering in total, what does it cost to run for school board or city council in Morgan Hill and Gilroy?
I thought I had it up there, maybe I didn't. Well, we do have a city ordinance, and the maximum contribution we could accept from any individual or corporation is $750. And then we are allowed to spend $1 per capita. So our population now is 56,000 people, so we could spend up to 56,000. My current budget is right around 42,000.
More questions?
Do you mind if I clarify?
Sure, yes. Go ahead.
Michelle, Deputy City Clerk, Morgan Hill. That just wanted to clarify that that's for Gilroy. Morgan Hill does not have campaign expenditure limits, nor do we have a $1 per capita limit. In Morgan Hill, the range for people running for council, ranges anywhere from a couple thousand to the most recent we had was in the 25,000. Our candidates in Morgan Hill have not typically spent that amount of money. It is in a wide range, but I would say anywhere around 10 to 15,000 has been more of a standard for Morgan Hill.
The same for, excuse me, same for school, getting all emotional. Same for school board. School board traditionally has not been that expensive to run a school board race. Occasionally you'll have a candidate who will spend a lot because they can, but you can also do it for much less. One of the key expenses I wanted to point out is the candidate statement that's been discussed. That's very expensive, no offense. And I think the city council's race is subsidized. So I think the city subsidizes those statements. The school district does not. because the school district puts all its money towards the children. But it used to be a few hundred, it's into thousands now last time, $2,000.
Close to $2,000.
To put that 200 words
Just
in
for
there.
your-
So
just for your
that's a
charter board
significant startup cost.
And if I could add, in 2014, Claudia about 25, and we're actually looking for 50,000. So it really does range. City councils typically here have been in a range of 8 to 20,000 at the most. I don't know what Renee spent, but he spent more than I think anyone ever has for a city council race.
He
But
started
it really-
campaigning 2 years before.
Yes, but the ranges really vary, and it really has a lot to do with how well you're known in the community where you're running for office. That name recognition, it could cost you a lot if you're not well known, but for Dennis Kennedy, for instance, his water board race, we kept it under 20,000 because everyone knew Dennis. So those are things to take into consideration when you're thinking about your campaign war chest.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
So what do you mean by $2,000 for a candidate statement? Is that the one that gets printed in the
Yeah.
thing? So, okay, so you have to pay to get that printed.
In Morgan Hill, we just got an estimate from the ROV. It's around $1,650, and the city of Morgan Hill, I believe, splits that with candidates. So we would collect the whole amount up front, and then once we got the final bill, we'd reimburse you for the half it actually was.
But not for the school board.
That's for city
Not for the
council.
school.
I think now with districts, would that impact the cost? Because is it only being printed for
For those districts.
districts? Is the distribution only per district? That could impact and reduce cost.
Yeah, the estimates I got did vary per district. So one estimate was 1,600, one was 1,630, and the mayor's was 1,900.
But clearly, just in terms of an overall race, going to districts is going to markedly change the cost structure because the number of mailers is smaller, the number of yard signs is smaller, everything is less, unless you're running for at-large mayor position. So, that's one of the few things that are beneficial about the district approach is that elections can be scaled down dramatically in terms of cost.
Oh, and one final thing. If you loan your campaign, say you put it on a personal credit card that gets filed as a personal loan to your campaign, you can recover that money once the campaign is over if you have that much money left in your campaign account. So that's one way that you can pay for it and get reimbursed from your own campaign.
So I ran for school board in the year 2012. And in 2012, my campaign cost me $500. And I was the big spender in that race. In the year 2014 and 2016, outside agencies started to introduce money supporting candidates who were running on certain positions. And some of the contributions from those outside agencies, which were permitted by law, exceeded for local races in excess of $6,000. And because of campaign laws being as they are, and I'm not exactly sure of the proper terminology, they weren't necessarily held accountable for that. I think that's PAC money. And essentially there was no, like I said, accountability for how much money they contributed towards a person's campaign. Now, Swanee references Claudia's race, and in Claudia's race with the county, that outside agency contributed in excess of $100,000 in mailers and other publicity for that other person. And in other races throughout the county, that number has been doubled. It's been in the $250,000 range. We don't have that problem to that extent here in our local races. We have, like we said, 7 trustee areas for school board and 4 council district seats. So hopefully the expenses will not be that high. And it's much like Dan had said, it's how you use your time, how you get the influence and exert the influence, and how much money you need and how you budget accordingly. So you can be concise, you can be efficient, and you can be effective with less money, but you really need to work at it.
But in 2014, there was 10 to 20,000 in the local school board race to 4 candidates from an outside organization. So there was, larger money in that campaign.
In school board races these days, if you want a lot of outside money, say that you're in favor of charter schools. And you'll get a ton of money.
I have a question. Kristina, when they decided the districts for the city, we've got a lot of brand new buildings going up with all these apartments. Was that taken into consideration, or are we going to need to redistrict?
Very good question. So we have our boundaries set up for this upcoming election for this year, but the boundaries are going to be revisited in 2020. And so that will take into account the new development that you're speaking of.
Many
developments.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to that? Is that going to be taken into account before or after the 2020 election?
After.
After.
It's based on the census.
Based on the census.
The developments that are being built fall within a district because the districts encompass the city limits. So if there's a house or apartment being built that isn't specifically called out with an address or APN on those lists, it still falls within that district, and in this upcoming 2018 election, somebody living in one of those residents would vote in that district. In 2020, technically 2021, 2022, we will revisit those districts based on the 2020 census. So those maps by law have to be based on census data, which is done every 10
So
years.
for 2020, it's going to be based on these maps, and it's not going to change until after.
Correct.
And part of the goal in setting up the districts was to kind of balance out the population. So to the extent that we have, a lot of new developments, a lot of new people, that will be rebalanced, if you will, as a new redistricting.
Other questions? Any other comments that you'd like to make that you might not have included? Yeah.
Perhaps Kristina could explain to the benefit of those who may not know why the city was called to divide itself into districts and why the school board was required to break itself into trustee areas. Can you reference the California Voting Rights Act?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to ask Michelle to talk about that. Probably don't need the mic.
So in May of 2017, the city of Morgan Hill was served with a demand letter, essentially demanding that the city of Morgan Hill file a resolution of intention to move to district elections. The consequences of not doing that are potentially being sued, and the city would have the burden of proof that there is not racially polarized voting within Morgan Hill, and that's an incredibly difficult thing to prove. And so given all of the information, the city council decided that it wasn't worth the risk of spending millions of city dollars fighting a lawsuit we may potentially lose. And so we decided to go ahead and adopt a resolution of intent and proceeded with the district process.
And I might add to that, I was on the school board when the school board went through it. And you might be interested to know that of the hundreds, and I don't remember the exact number, but of the hundreds of cases that have been brought forward on this, not once has the agency, the school board, the city council, hospital districts, community college districts, not once have they ever prevailed in court. And the penalties, starting at the earliest days, I believe it was the Modesto City School District, not only did they have to pay their own court costs, but they had to pay the fees for the prevailing party. So their costs, I think, exceeded $5 million.
Yeah. So it was no good.
It was a sensible decision. Yeah, just to add, I come from a county that was protected under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And it didn't stem from anything. It stemmed from the 70s and data that meant nothing. But to get out from underneath the umbrella of the Voting Rights Act is extremely difficult. And the County of Monterey has been under that umbrella for about 30 years, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And the amount of hoops you have to jump through when you want to make a minor change. You have to write to them a certain number of days in advance and get permission, and they ask you for all kinds of information. So you know, that umbrella is a very large and thick umbrella, so it's important to understand what you're getting into if you try to challenge that or get challenged or whatnot.
I think I'll just be loud. It's a hypothetical. So what happens if no candidate arises from a particular district?
We were having this discussion earlier. We've had it a few times. Essentially, if an election is up, for example, we have B and D this coming November. If somebody does not run from one of those, the council then has the choice to go through an appointment process, such as we did when Councilmember Siebert resigned, or they can hold a special election. Special elections are very expensive, over $100,000, sometimes a couple hundred, depending on timing. And so in our case, which wasn't district specific, but council decided to take an application and appointment process, and it sounds like something similar that Dan went through in Gilroy. So ideally, we would go through an appointment process and solicit candidates from that district to be appointed. We're not entirely clear if you still don't get any candidates. The question that I really would like to get clarity on is, do we just keep going from that district? Does that seat remain vacant? Or can we at that point, if we've tried an election and an appointment process, can we at that point do an at-large election for that? I don't believe we can, but I'd like to be really clear on that.
I would just add real briefly that having gone through this, and I'd mentioned I worked in San Francisco where there are very distinct neighborhoods. And anybody who lives out in the Avenues is very different from anybody who lived in Soma, who lived different from all these, and that made sense. But in Morgan Hill, we're just too small. So I don't think it made sense for Morgan Hill, and I encourage all of us as voters to just make sure that whoever gets appointed to any of the districts is representative of the whole community. As much, Steve used to live up on the hill of Jackson Oaks, and I used to tease him all the time that we were wasting all of our money spending, pumping water up to his hill. But it was a jest, and if we start becoming tribal like that, and there really is one side saying, no, we need all our money for the pumps, and the other one saying no, it will just start to divide the community. So I would just encourage us as citizens to make sure that whoever gets appointed still represents the whole community, even though they came from one part of it.
Good. I don't need a mic. One more quick point on the district thing. The other case is only one person who's qualified, legal citizen living in the right, only one person pulls papers, they win.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
And
So you can have an almost $0 campaign, and just something to think about for people considering whether to run. I just think for democracy, one person pulls papers and tag, you're it. It's really not how it's supposed to work.
Well, and since we've been through it once, the person's name doesn't even appear on a ballot.
Right.
They aren't really appointed or elected.
Ollie Oxen, you're it.
They're just it.
And we have a case like that, I believe, on our school.
We do. We had
Yes,
an unopposed candidate, and nobody had the opportunity to hear her speak at any public sessions. She did not publish any position papers. She did not participate in the civic event sponsored by the AAUW. So you have a member on the school board who you know nothing about.
If there is only one candidate, the governing body can still place that on the ballot if they want to. In the town of Woodside in San Mateo County, they once opted to place the races on the ballot even though they had one person running, and a write-in candidate stepped up to the plate and ended up winning. And they decided, and this apparently was one of the best council members that they had had, and this person never came in during the filing period, and so they decided at that moment on, from every election, even if there was only one person, they were going to put it on the ballot anyway to give write-in candidates an opportunity to give the voters of the town another choice. That write-in candidate's name doesn't go on the ballot. There's nothing in the candidate guide. In the local voter information guide about the candidate. So it's much harder to win, but it can happen.
Thank you, that's a really important point.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. And how they can call this voters' rights, when it really does, like Bob said, take the decision out of our hands as voters. by districting, you know.
Yeah.
I was thoroughly against it, and I think there's many in the room here that were as well.
But that's why we're having this discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
Other questions? Sometimes questions bring up questions. In that case, I'll adjourn, and thank you so much for all of you.